Hello, everyone. Welcome to Visionary Futures, Science Fiction Theater for Social Justice Movements. My name is Josh Glenn-Kayden. I use he, him, his pronouns, and I am the creator and director of this project. Before we get started, we would like to acknowledge that UMass Amherst exists on the ancestral and unceded territory of the Abenaki, the Wabanaki Confederacy, Pawtucket, Nipmuc, Pecumtuck, and Nonotuck nations. We affirm that it is important to understand and honor the history of this indigenous land that we occupy, while recognizing that this acknowledgement is insufficient and does not undo the legacies of violence and displacement towards indigenous people. We aim to take small steps towards a future of decolonization and reconciliation. Thank you. So, Visionary Futures explores the intersections of science fiction theater and social justice movements. We've commissioned 3 great playwrights to each write a short play that engages in visionary fiction, which really means science fiction that is engaging with systems of oppression and imagining more just futures. A crucial part of this process was pairing each writer with an activist or scholar whose work intersects with each play's content. These teams have had conversations throughout the process to create work that is visionary in approach, while still being grounded in a contemporary understanding of what those movements are working on right now. We've been developing these plays all year and are really excited to share them with you now. Tonight, you'll be hearing and watching excerpts from Beyond Reform by Jaymes Sanchez, interspersed with discussions with the creative team. This is a play that is still in progress, and so this event is going to focus on the process so far and the potential next steps in this kind of work. And everything you're about to see will be done fully live, thanks to our wonderful actors and streaming video team. So I think that's everything to get us started. So I'm going to turn it over to our first excerpt with McCauley reading the opening speech of the play. Enjoy.
This is a story about justice. More specifically, this is a story about how 2 people, Danielle and Beau, came to change justice forever. I'm not one of them. As a matter of fact, their efforts saved my life. There's also someone very important named May. I hurt May once, irreparably. They almost blew this whole thing up. I don't blame them, not after what I put them through. More broadly, though, this story isn't about me, or even about Danielle, Beau, and May. This story is about all of you, everyone who is watching, and really everyone who isn't watching as well. Without digging up anything too painful, I want you to think of a person who has wronged you in any way. Could be your coworker, could be your mother, could be your governor, whatever. Imagine that person getting what they deserve. Picture it. Are you imagining them suffering? Congratulations! You've just scratched the surface of one of the potentially unsolvable problems of our civilization. How should we deal with people who have harmed others? How do we define harm and determine what satisfies that definition? What is the purpose of dealing with people who have caused harm? Is the purpose to punish the harm? Is the purpose to prevent and reduce future harm? The answer to these questions matter. They matter a lot. But we'll get to that later. For now, let's talk about Danielle and Beau. Danielle's an inventor and Beau's an activist. Both wanted to change the way the justice system worked, but they went about it in different ways. Beau tried to change a society that wasn't ready to change, while Danielle tried to invent things that would only work in a society that was ready to change. How fun! Just take a look at what happened when Danielle tried going on reality TV to look for investors for one of her inventions.
That was great. Thank you, May. And welcome. Thank you for joining us for this in-process discussion about Beyond Reform by Jaymes Sanchez. My name's Tatiana Godfrey, and I am the dramaturg for Visionary Futures. Let's meet the other members of our panel tonight. Jaymes?
Hi, friends. Jaymes Sanchez. I'm the playwright, he, him, his.
Hi, I'm Eli. I use they and he pronouns, and I am the consulting activist.
And I'm Josh. I use he, him, his pronouns, and I am the director of the project. So this project really takes a lot of inspiration from the Octavia's Brood anthology, co-edited by Lolita Imarisha and Adrienne Murray Brown, which explores the connections between radical speculative fiction and sci-fi and movements for social change. So this anthology commissioned a bunch of activists to each write short stories of visionary fiction and published a full collection. When I was thinking about a thesis project for my directing MFA, and especially a digital thesis project, right, in this moment, I was really excited to create a theatrical version of this kind of work. So we commissioned our 3 playwrights to each write about a 30-minute play or so, engaging with visionary fiction, paired these playwrights with activists who are experts in the field and know a lot about the contemporary movements that these plays are talking about. So through these conversations, we're ideally creating work that is visionary and thinking forward in approach, but also really understands the contemporary ramifications of what we're doing. And so thinking about a digital thesis project, sci-fi plays seem to make sense for this medium. I think going sci-fi gives you a lot of potential for design and for some creative problem solving in a digital world. We commissioned plays that are around 30 minutes long because I think that's the sort of general Zoom attention span. And doing things digitally actually meant that we could work with people all over the country, not just people in Western Mass. So we have collaborators in New York, Austin, Philly, DC, Chicago, Amherst. It's wild. So I would love to start with talking to Jaymes a little bit and asking, when we first commissioned you for this project, what did you want to write about and why?
Thanks, Josh. So one of the things that I studied a lot in college was political theory in the government department. And one of the big questions that a lot of political theory asks is, what is justice? So that's a question that I've been really interested in for a long time, really. And I think that question has a lot of high theoretical applications, and it has a lot of very practical present day applications, especially, today in the United States, when law enforcement and incarceration have reached the point of being such a crisis that something really has to change. So I was really thinking about, well, for a criminal justice system, basically what is the main purpose or main ideal or main goal of having any kind of criminal justice system? Because there are a lot of things that you could say. I mean, your goal could be to punish people. It could be to prevent future harm. It could be to take people who have made mistakes and try to help them not make mistakes again. And what I found is that in the United States today, sometimes a lot of those different impulses are kind of opposed to each other. So with this play, I was thinking about the need to take people who have made mistakes and help them not make mistakes again, versus this innate need for revenge, this innate need to punish someone and see someone who has done wrong suffer. And so with this play, I was trying to figure out, well, if we ever get ourselves on the road to real criminal justice system reform, or perhaps even destroying a criminal justice system and like building something new that looks nothing like what we have right now, if we ever get on the road to actually doing that, what is going to be the backlash? What is going to be the resistance because of this desire to see people punished, which is really, punishing people is really what our system is good at right now. And so, yeah, so that balance between punishment versus really anything else is the thing that I was most interested in exploring with this play.
Interesting. That really, I think that definitely comes out, and that's something that we're going to talk about later. One of the questions that this play asks is, where does crime come from? And I want to turn to our resident expert to talk about that. Something we discover as the play unfolds is that people have different thoughts about what generates crime. Eli, can you offer your insights as to why crime happens?
Yeah. First, let me say I don't think there's any one reason that crime happens. And second, let me say that I think crime, to a large extent, is socially constructed, and what is and is not a crime changes over time across cultures, and even within, our own culture varies from state to state and municipality to municipality. I think folks who, like me, are abolitionists generally think of crime in relation to unmet needs. So the sort of classic example that's used is people rob a grocery store because they're hungry. But I think that example also applies to significantly more violent crimes that maybe come from more intractable social problems. So like serious drug dealing comes from unmet economic needs. I think like we could talk about sexual violence coming from an understanding of sex that is linked to violence instead of care and respect, and more broadly to a world in which rape culture permeates our society. I think we could talk about the ways in which even something as seemingly serious as murder comes from various unmet needs, both sort of societal needs and individual needs. And at the same time, when we think of crime, we're talking about something that we as a society have chosen to criminalize and pathologize. We're talking about something that is seen as wrong, and that really does shift significantly.
We hear in this first monologue that this is a person who has committed crime, or has caused harm. This character, Jill. In your first draft, Jaymes, Jill was a character but didn't open the play. Where did the choice to have Jill open this play come from, and why make that change?
That's a really good question. Yeah, Jill was in the play. She was a small part in the first draft, and I wanted to give her more of a voice going forward. One of the things that I ran into is that I don't think this particular play in this particular form is really about Jill, and I struggled with that for a while. I came to that realization fairly late in the process, and I think I have other plays, both in draft form and in idea form, that are more about the experience of people who make mistakes and go through law enforcement, go through incarceration, go through those kinds of systems, and trying to figure out what their experience is. But ultimately, I came to realize that this play isn't really about that. It's about the rest of us, those of us who see ourselves as completely different from people who end up committing crimes. And even though we're not that different, I would argue we're not particularly different at all. It's just, as like Eli said, a matter of where those unmet needs are. But it's about all of us who consider ourselves not criminals, who consider ourselves different from the people that find themselves in those situations, and how we as a group that's composed of lots of different overlapping groups can kind of interact with and deal with and explore this apparent need for revenge and for punishment that our criminal justice system is really good at. But even though I knew that that's what the play was about, I didn't want to completely remove Jill, because I do think that she is very important. So I decided to give her this power of being a narrator that is in the story and outside of the story, so that even though it's a story that's not necessarily her story, she has the power to tell it. And I thought, I'm not convinced that I'm there yet, but I'm trying to go for a balance of having her as an agent and also as someone who is just caught up in all of these things that like we as an entire society need to figure out, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, that's great. So next up, we're seeing a scene that we've been calling Shark Idol, which that'll make sense in a moment, I promise. Jaymes, do you want to set us up for this? What we should know before going in?
It's hard to say. It's hard to say. Yeah, it's a reality show. Danielle is pitching this mind-altering invention, trying to get funding for it, but she runs into a lot of pushback for what she's trying to do. This scene just kind of like is a result of me just wanting to have fun with the conversations that are playing out in my head, and a lot of times those conversations come out as stylized and satirical and goofy, and really that form of humor is kind of a way of me thinly masking my rage at a lot of things and trying to place it in the context of humor so that hopefully it communicates just the absurdity of a lot of these different situations. And I think, as some of our castmates said, it also kind of creates this link between the way that crime is constructed and capitalism, which there's something there. I haven't quite fully fleshed that out in this play, but it's definitely there.
Awesome. So we are gonna throw it over to the actors and to Shark Idol, and then we'll be back. See you in a minute.
Next up on Shark Idol, Danielle, a 32-year-old inventor and world-renowned virtual reality expert from Boston, has something she says can revolutionize the criminal justice system. But what do the sharks think?
Imagine, if you will, a world without crime. You no longer stop what you're doing to second guess whether you locked your doors. You no longer carry your keys between your fingers at night or in parking garages. You no longer worry about how you're dressed or what you're drinking. Let your mind and heart imagine the possibilities if you could just let go of those fears. What does that world look like? With your support, that world doesn't look too different from our world. Of course, there are many steps between us and that utopia. That's where you and I come in. I have developed a neurological interface machine with accompanying software that is proven to rehabilitate 75% of convicted criminals within 90 days of immersion in the program. This machine delves into the mind of a person in order to neurologically undo the traumas that have driven people to committing crimes. If we can attract state and local governments into this program, we can rehabilitate the inmates in their system and set them up for a successful re-entry into society. We can attract people who have yet to commit a crime, but are desperately seeking therapy for issues that could lead them to crime. It may take some time, but history would remember us right here on this call as the people who took this giant leap for humankind. We'll be remembered as the people who prioritized rehabilitation instead of punishment. We'll be remembered as the people who created a safer, happier society. Oh, yeah, and we'll make a lot of money. Too, like a lot of money.
Is that all?
It's kind of a lot.
So when they finish the treatment, they don't want to commit no more crime.
Precisely. Well, the data and models and statistical regressions indicate
straight
that...
answer, does it work or not?
Of course it works. If you look at the data packets I've given you, you'll see...
I can't read this, dog.
There's like numbers and letters and neat little symbols in it. Look at that!
Yes, the data, it indicates,
You have done such a good job. Look at you with your little scientist self. Yeah, girl, yeah! That being said, I'm afraid I must decline.
Why?
Something about it just seems too, I don't know, easy?
I don't understand.
You know, they beat up a baby. Or worse, they destroy expensive private property. They go to you for 3 months, you zap their little brain, and you hold their little hand, and you say, don't you do that no more. And what? They just don't?
Yeah, basically.
Where's the penalty? Where's the stakes? Where's the suffering?
Suffering is traumatic, and trauma creates criminals. Punitive measures increase crime.
Do they, though?
Yes, there is a mountain of research on this. Prison causes more crimes.
I don't think it does. No, sorry.
So if I'm Johnny Steely Boy and I finish your treatment and I go home and I don't have any food in the cupboard, what then? I just won't go down to the shop and steal a loaf of bread? The thought won't cross my mind?
Well, that is a specific and extreme
In
case.
many cases are.
Extreme or specific?
Of course.
The best way to stop people from committing crimes for basic necessities is to make basic necessities more accessible. Best way to do that is to tax the rich, which I bet you're all lining up for. Look, I'm an inventor. I invent things. I see a problem and then I use my vast technological expertise to address the problem. That's all I can do. I can't reinvent society, but I can invent something that will undo the traumas that society can inflict on its people, whether they subsequently encounter those same traumas.
It's out of your control.
How many of your test subjects have been convicted of a crime after being in your program?
Ooh, good question.
Well,
It's less than the national recidivism average.
ooh, ouch. That's gonna be a no for me, dog. Next time you do this, make it more personal.
Wait.
Good luck.
No, come on.
If this country ever becomes more humane, I'm sure someone will be interested in your little invention, but for now, I don't like it. I don't like you. Good day.
Wait! You haven't even heard the testimonials. It can totally work. I just need funding. Come on!
Welcome back. Thank you, actors. Eli, so the conceit of this machine that Danielle is pitching here is that it heals individual trauma. Is healing trauma a viable solution to decreasing the amount of people who commit crimes?
I think engaging in healing work is an important piece of the puzzle in terms of decreasing crime. But I think one of the things that I really like about this particular segment is Jaymes has written it in a way that really gets at sort of the fallacy of the ways in which liberals often view crime, which is about rehabilitating individuals. And I think folks farther to the left, I think, see this in a more structural way, right? Like understand that it's not that individuals do bad things so much as it's that there's a structure in place which is enacting violence on people because of their class, because of their race, because of other identity markers that marginalize them. And so doing community-based healing work is certainly part of that, but I think doing this very pathologized, individualized, like almost like conversion therapy is sort of a liberal fallacy. I think it's sort of a trap in that it distracts from the reasons, and I think that's in some ways what the sort of like obnoxious British shark is getting at, right? Is that like you can, all wild ethical issues aside, you can zap someone's brain, but if they still have an unmet need because of structural violence that has been enacted on them, that doesn't really solve the problem.
Thank you. And And so, Jaymes, sort of within this conversation about healing trauma and this invention, can you talk a little bit about what we learned in our early conversations with Eli about the machine and these concepts and how that spurred some change in the play?
Yeah, definitely. So Eli did a really great job of helping me figure out how the way I was thinking about the play was kind of doing a lot of things that I actually didn't really want to do. I think in the first draft of the play, I was really a lot more into the invention as just kind of the main thing of the play. And the reason for that was because, you know, being a person who, you know, I'm a playwright, I used to be a teacher. I'm not immersed in the work that Eli is in. And so because of that, I was in a really like prime position to just kind of like get tunnel vision and focus on something that was a conceptually interesting dichotomy to me, which was, you know, punishment versus, you know, anything else, this rehabilitation thing that Eli was talking about. And because I got that kind of tunnel vision into that, you know, that oppositional relationship, I didn't realize that the play that I was writing was saying things about criminal justice, like the criminal justice system and the people that get caught up in it. It was saying things that I didn't want to say. And so in this draft of the play, I tried to construct it in a way that simultaneously talks about where crime comes from and also talks about well, just this difference between punishment and anything else. And I think the thing that I was originally caught up with was just, you know, if we had the ability to just magically press a button and be assured that this person will never commit a crime again, what are the boundaries or what are the hurdles that we would still have to overcome in order to make that thing a reality? And that question, I think, is really interesting, and it's the question that I still want to interact with, but I simplified it way too much in the first draft, and in this draft, I'm trying to complicate it a little bit more. But that remains the question. Again, just like, if we could just magically be assured that this person, whoever it is, just would never do anything bad ever again if we put them through, you know, whatever therapy we have at our disposal, would we forego, would we give up our right to inflict pain on that person because of what they've done? And I think what I'm trying to do with this play is just express that I'm not sure that we would. And that to me is just really fascinating, and that's really what I'm into with this play.
Yeah, that's great. And I'm so glad we're having this kind of conversation around the play, because to me, like this back and forth and these conversations have been a real success of the process. So we've been commissioning folks to be writing these imaginative and speculative plays about future systems, and at the same time, really trying to reckon with how those ideas matter in our contemporary world, and when those ideas could come into conflict with the work that's currently happening right now, right? So having folks in the room who are active in these movements and can help us shape and develop these conversations to come from a place of making work responsibly and really thinking about everyone's intent versus potential impact. That feels like, to me, something that has been a real success of this development work together, is making sure that what we think we're doing and what we want to do is actually what we end up doing. So thank you for talking about that. And we're starting, I mean, I think Jaymes, you already said some of this, but something that has been really interesting to me is this idea and this theme in the play of exploring how committed we are as a people to punishment, even if there was a perfect way to reintroduce them into society with filled needs and providing for them. Would we give up that desire for punishment? And you've sort of talked about this a little bit, but just I would love to hear a little more about how that theme has changed between the various drafts of the play.
That's a really good question. It's hard to say, and I think that's one thing that I'm still exploring. But I do think that the thing that I keep coming back to is that like I think that there has to be some kind of reckoning with those of us who consider ourselves to be, different from the people who have committed crimes and detached from the systems that have created the unmet needs that have created those crimes. I mean, even though like, we are a part of those systems and we benefit from them, contribute to them, and there's really not that much separation between people who commit crimes and people who don't. That's definitely something that I'm still puzzling over. And I think what I keep coming back to is that like this feeling of separation, this feeling that like there is this pathologized reason why people do bad things, is one of the reasons why I'm not convinced that we would give up that need to punish people. And so like that's one of the things that I keep coming back to, is just on the road to creating a more just world, what are the roadblocks, what are the challenges, what are the hurdles we're going to come in contact with. So yeah, I don't know if that answers your question, but that's something that I think about a lot.
That's great.
Yeah, that's really brilliant. Because I think in the scenes that we're about to see, we're really seeing this come to a head. We're seeing this dichotomy. We're about to see some Beau Danielle scenes, the characters Beau and Danielle. James, what do we need to know about these?
So the scene that we're not showing is the Senate scene, where Beau, as an activist, is the head of this growing social movement for reforming the criminal justice system, and the Senate just kind of grills him. These conservative senators grill him about, why do you want to help? Why do we want to give these resources to, vile, like lower than human scum, which is a way that like a magnification of the way that people actually talk about people who have committed crimes. But that whole hearing doesn't go well because the way that I've written it, there's this huge backlash to this growing social movement, which I think happens to every movement. There's this huge backlash, and that backlash is a result of people that just like want to see people thrown in prison and suffer for like transgressions that they've committed. So that's what we don't get. And yeah, the scene kind of picks up with just Danielle and Beau having this reunion because they know each other and they've been working on criminal justice reform from different angles for a long time.
Awesome. Let's turn it back to our actors.
I'm just having all kinds of reunions today.
Good to see you too, Beau.
What are you doing here?
Saving your movement?
The movement's just fine.
I mean, in this moment. I know if you lose, you live to fight another day. I mean, right now. We're gonna get your system passed.
Oh, yeah?
Of course.
How do you plan on doing that?
By doing what I do best.
I'm glad you're here, but...
No buts. I'm saving the day.
Please tell me it's a new invention.
Sort of, but not entirely.
We've had this conversation so many times.
No, you have had a monologue so many times. I have merely been an involuntary participant.
Whatever. I'll say it again anyway. The social construct of crime is a systemic problem. Systems are all about power. You can't change a system with an invention if the system is working exactly as designed.
And how's changing society working out for you? Are people responding to your logic? How about your data,
I think you know the answers to those questions.
Okay then, shut up about my inventions.
I'm sorry, but you zap a guy's brain but don't give him any food, he's gonna steal food again, just like he used to the moment he gets hungry enough.
Sounds like you've seen my episode of Shark Idol, and you didn't even compliment my outfit.
I saw it. I've been fighting the damage you did to our cause for 2 years because of it.
You're exaggerating.
Only by a little bit.
Fine, whatever. I'm about to reverse the damage anyway.
At this point, I'll listen to anything.
We're gonna give them a compromise they can get behind.
What kind of compromise?
One that admittedly is going to suck for the people in the system?
The current system already sucks.
Exactly. The new one will suck substantially less.
But don't you see that it's a problem that cruelty is a built-in feature?
Of course I do. But the cruelty has always been there, and it ain't going down without a fight.
I can't do this.
Unfortunately, if they like my idea, you won't have much of a choice.
It's my plan.
Tough break, kid. Maybe focus on becoming a senator first, then you can call all the shots you want.
Please don't do this.
Why not? Your social movement is stalling out in Congress. It's this or nothing until the next time you can get people to look away from their phones long enough to care.
We can't give up something so fundamental.
And people in prison can't keep living in prison. Gotta go for the net gain.
That is so fucking cynical.
And sticking to your principles reeks of privilege. Some people cannot wait. We need to move now, and I'm gonna give them a reason to do it.
Leave me out of it.
You should be thanking me. It passed. Prisons are on the way out. It won't happen overnight, but soon. People like us have only been trying to do this for what? 100 years?
It's torture. Danielle, it's torture.
It's not real torture.
Torture is torture.
Maybe it's time I tell you what's really going on here.
What do you mean?
It's the same invention.
Which invention?
The one you said would never work?
I said it wouldn't work because it wouldn't fix their unfulfilled needs.
But it's perfect, Bo. Your system will provide for their needs, and my invention will help them heal.
It's still a ludicrous idea. Arbitrarily defined criminality isn't a trait or a condition. It's not some biological thing that can be cured.
It's not biological. It's psychological. It's about trauma. Always has been. And of course, you can't fully cure that, but we can make it better. Bo, I've used it on myself.
I don't understand.
Trauma. You know me, Bo. The prison system destroyed my family. I spent years trying every PTSD therapy I could find. Talk, medication, hypnosis, stress inoculation, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, you name it. This device is like all of those things on steroids. It works, and we need it. Because taking care of someone's needs doesn't account for the damage that has already been done by years of poverty, abuse, fear of violence, you name it.
I don't see any of them healing while they constantly feel like they have paper cuts.
That's the best part. I can turn that function off. It works when we need it to, but it's all for show. With this new justice system, people like us can build communities, safe havens for people who have made mistakes.
You really think this will work?
I do. They can finally heal. They won't go through what your dad went through. They won't go through what my family went through.
I wish I could be as excited as you, but I just can't. You're manipulating the society's desire for righteous cruelty. You're lying when you should be trying to make them see the truth. That there's no place in this world for cruelty. That punishment only causes more harm. That's real change.
That real change isn't happening anytime soon. I'm honestly not sure that change is possible. We're a violent species.
It's just another one of your virtual realities. If you don't change the cruelty at the heart of this, there will always be danger, because the moment people find out that the suffering has stopped, they're going to want blood.
I can live with that.
I can't. I won't be a part of this.
So what then?
I'll keep doing the work I believe in.
I wouldn't expect any less from you. Take care of yourself.
Yeah. So in these scenes, we really see these two ideas really butting heads. We have one character, Bo, that they're working for big picture change and really leaning towards prison abolition, and Danielle, who wants pragmatic, quicker fixes that maybe perhaps play into larger issues. I would like to open this up for general discussion, and I think we're probably going to rely a little heavily on Eli here to talk about where do we see this tension today? What does this kind of binary thinking, how does it fail us in other ways?
Yeah, this is a really interesting illustration, I think, because it does get, again, to this tension between liberals and more radical ideas about criminality, about abolition, and it illustrates the reality that I think the conversation in criminal justice, to some extent at this point, is not between sort of like conservatives and liberals. In a lot of ways, I think it's between liberals and radicals, which is a testament to how much radicals have been able to move the conversation sort of in their favor, and sort of how much organizing, mostly done by Black and brown communities, has been able to shift us as a country to a point where we're even like talking about prison abolition, and where like on NPR the other day, someone was like, well, I don't think Biden identifies as someone that thinks we should abolish the police. And I was like, the fact that we're even having a conversation about whether the president of the United States thinks we should abolish the police is like an incredible testament to how much powerful work has been done. But and also like, obviously he doesn't. But I think we see this play out in a lot of ways. So like one concrete example that I was thinking about as the scene was being read is like this move towards at-home incarceration. So like putting ankle monitors on people, having or other surveillance systems. And I think at first it's a very Danielle kind of idea. It seems more humane. People can be at home, they can be with their families. And then when you dig into it, what it's really doing is just expanding prison into someone's home. It's instead of being in prison and having that be the way that you're incarcerated, your whole world essentially becomes a prison. You're surveilled constantly. It's like a sort of Orwellian turn masquerading as liberal reform. And so I think there's a lot of examples, and that's one of the reasons that for me, the overarching idea of abolition feels helpful, even if it's like way, way down the road, because it feels like it grounds like what I'm doing in an analysis that relies on a future where we've completely abolished these systems instead of one where we've just sort of rejiggered them.
Yeah, this is great. And it's this conversation has been so interesting as we talk about, I think, the sort of this specific project and potentially some of the either limitations of either the short play format, right? Like how do you talk about this deeply complicated discussion? How do you fill that into a 30-minute piece, right? And I think that is something that we're running up against in the limits of what we're asking of writers here. And also, right, this thinking about how one play or one piece of art just can't capture an entire conversation, right? Which goes back to Jaymes, what you were talking about earlier is like, who is this play about, and really being clear about what parts of the discussion and what people the play can center, and what is just more than a play can hold, right? Which I think is just me advocating for more plays that are dealing with this kind of work and doing so in a responsible way, so that we can't expect Jaymes to write a play that takes on everything, but we also want to be responsible within what we're saying and what our bounds are. And we ideally would have more and more work coming out about these conversations, and really just these larger big social questions that we're wrestling with as a society, and using this kind of work to create these kinds of conversation and potentially change some people's minds about what they may have accepted to be true before.
Yeah, that's great. We're gonna see one more monologue, and this is our book ending of Jill, the character of Jill. We're gonna bring it back to Jill. So let's turn it back over to the actors.
Are you uncomfortable that this is a relatively positive result for me? Are you disappointed that I, apparently the most morally reprehensible person in this thing, suffered no cathartic comeuppance? If you'd like to see me punished, you're not alone. I'm right there with you. But, and I personally hate to be the one saying this, maybe we should all try to focus less on what feels good and focus more on what is good.
Yes, distilling arguments into sentences is one of my favorite pastimes. Thank you for that, James. So one of the reasons that we wanted activists to be a part of this project is to ground the play and the work that's happening right now. Eli, can you talk a little bit about the current state of the prison abolition movement and how could I or perhaps an audience member get involved?
Yeah, so one of the things I like to say about abolition is that it's not an absence, it's a presence. And for the record, that I like to say it, but it's not I didn't invent that term. It really belongs to Ruth Wilson Gilmore, who's like a sort of legendary figure in the field and someone worth reading if you're interested in abolition, alongside folks like Mariam Kaba and many others. So if we think about it as a presence, a lot of it is about building up these alternatives. And I think that can happen in an everyday way, right? Like we're not going to abolish the police tomorrow. I don't know that we'll abolish the police in my lifetime, but I think there's a lot of abolitionist work that still revolves around building up structures so that at a certain point, we don't actually need the police and we don't need the courts to address harm and to heal from harm and to do justice, because we know that those systems don't actually do any of those things. So I think there's lots of ways to do that. I think there's some really exciting restorative and transformative justice work happening where communities are getting together and saying, like, how do we heal from harm in a way that holds people accountable and thinks about their needs and the needs of people they may have harmed in a way that is holistic, in a way that leads to growth, in a way that ends positively for all parties, which I think like sounds really like woo woo, but once you've seen it done, you're like, wow, this is wild. And I think there's also a lot of work right now. A lot of the work I do is around pretrial detention. So getting people out of jail who have not actually been convicted of a crime, but are incarcerated only because they're poor and can't afford their own bail. I think that's in many ways abolitionist work. And there's bail funds across the United States that there's probably one in your community wherever you live that is probably looking for volunteers, that is probably looking for donations. And I think also there's lots of advocacy work to think about just simply removing the criminal legal system from places where it just does not need to be, right? So recently, in the last year, in the wake of George Floyd's death and the uprisings that occurred in many American cities, a lot of school districts are starting to think about, like, why do we have police in our schools? Like, do we need to have police in schools? And we've used the criminal legal system as this catch-all mechanism to deal with all these social problems, but we actually have lots of other ways to deal with them. And so I think for folks interested in getting involved in this work, I would see who is doing the work in your community to build up resources for folks that have some kind of unmet need, which can really range from people who are dealing with homelessness, people who are dealing with substance use, to like people who like got mad at their friend and want to like have a mediation session where like they talk about it. I think those are all things that in my mind relate to building up abolitionist frameworks.
That's really great. Thank you, Eli. And so, James, as we sort of near the end of this event and this process, if we were to keep working on this play, and we may, what do you think would be the next steps, or what are the things you're still excited to explore within this work to keep tinkering with?
Yeah. So one of the big things that I want to do is try to make everything that that Bo and Danielle talk about a little bit more personal to them, kind of deepen their personal connections to those things. In some ways, a lot of it reads a lot like a Socratic dialogue, which I think is really effective for a 30-minute play, but also not necessarily how I always want to write. So finding ways to create like personal access points for those two characters to really be immersed with this work and have attachments to it to make the stakes of failure or success really high. I think that's something that I'm around with. I also want to play around with Danielle's invention a little bit more. If there are more things that it could do, if there are more ways that it could complicate the world. Right now, it's basically this kind of like this thing for like a therapy for psychological trauma, and then she it's like adds on to it at the end that it can also make someone feel like they have wet socks or paper cuts or a toe cramp or something like that, and only does that to appease the senators who are obsessed with punishment. And I think that those things kind of work, but I also kind of want to explore the possibilities of what an inventor who is in this mindset that is definitely less radical than Bo, how that person would think and would add on like more sci-fi type things to this invention in ways that I think can get at this conflict or this tension between liberal people and more radical people like Eli was talking about. So yeah, so just the personal connections for these characters, and also how the invention can be used in more ways to increase the tension between these two different standpoints.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. Something that I really appreciate about tonight and this process in general is that, so often in the American theater, we're really focused on the finished product, the finished draft, the play that gets published, the final version. And to be able to sit and talk about process and to chronicle things that worked and to continue to think forward about what would be next is, I think, really meaningful for me and for us as we put this whole project together. And I think something that is really useful as we think about making art that matters and is responsible to the world that we live in. So thank you all so much for being here tonight and being part of this work together. We're at the end of our evening together. So I am going to call the actors back to take a quick bow, and then we'll all head out for the night. Thank you all so much. And we have another week of performances coming up, so check out the UMass Theater website for those, and hopefully we'll see you again soon.